Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Last Word with Ahmed podcast, and I'm your host, Ahmed. Wow, what is going on, guys? This is the first episode, and I can't believe it. It's ridiculous. This is episode one of season one. I'm excited. I hope you guys are excited as I am because there's gonna be weekly episodes with different content. Uh, so before we get into this podcast, make sure you guys subscribe, follow wherever you're listening to this. So in this episode, as you can see by the title, I'll be talking about how to start traveling more. I know many people want to start traveling more and want to learn how to travel more. I'm not a seasoned traveler, but I've traveled to different places and I've lived in different places for quite a while now. So before we get into the tips of how to start traveling more, I actually want to talk about where I've lived. So probably most of you know I've lived in well, I live in three countries. Well, I've lived in three countries. So one is the US, the West, boring. Uh, Two, I've lived in Egypt, and three, I live now in the UAE. I'm currently doing college in the UAE, or most of you probably don't know is Dubai, as we know it's called Dubai. Uh, so I've lived my whole life. I grew up in the US. I've lived there here. I'm here right now, so I've lived here for roughly 17 years until high school. Yep. So after high school, I actually went to Egypt. Me and my brother, and a few other people that we know, we went to Egypt. So I've lived there for 2 years. I was doing Islamic studies actually, like the Quran, Arabic, and these sorts of matters. I was doing that for 2 years. So I've lived there. That's like I was living in the ghetto. I'm gonna just be straight up. Over there was the ghetto, but it made me into the person I am today, and alhamdulillah for that. It made me go into the person that I am right now. And currently, right now, I live in UAE, Dubai. Lived there for 3 years now. I'm going into the fourth year. I'm finishing up college or university, as some people call it. I'm finishing that up, and I've gotten so many different experiences traveling. Like I've traveled from Egypt to Dubai, Dubai to Egypt, Dubai to US, uh, Egypt to US, US to Egypt. I've traveled so many times. Those are the two main countries that I've been to that I say like okay, I'm professional in traveling there now basically. Uh, so living there in those two countries, I enjoyed it. Both of them were total opposites of each other. So I feel like living in Egypt, it set me up for getting ready to live in Dubai because living in Egypt, I was living in like I said, the ghetto. Like it was pretty bad living situations. I lived in different cities and I moved around a little bit, and I can only say like maybe once or twice, alhamdulillah, I lived in uh like pretty normal places, which was nice and modern. But the other places that I've lived in was like so ridiculous. So that set me up to get ready to live in Dubai, which is very modern. It's like a modern Islamic state, you can say. I think it's more advanced in technology than the US in some areas. So I enjoyed living in both because Egypt was getting me ready to live in Dubai. So I have three tips for you guys on how to start traveling more actually. And I think these will help because there's many more tips. I'll probably cover that in later episodes. Uh, but these are three main tips that I think that's important for so you can start traveling more. Well, the first one, okay, before I start, I'll say that the tips are like uh, don't don't do this type tips. So it's gonna be three don't do this, don't do that, don't do this example. But before we get into those, I want to say one quick thing. Before you start traveling, you have to get your passport. You have to get your passport. I know there's so many people that don't have their passports yet. And like, I'd be so confused when I ask people, I'm like, oh, do you have your passport? They'll be like, no. I'll be like, bro, what are you doing? But I can't say nothing because I got my passport pretty late. Not late, but I got mine well, no, I didn't. Actually, I got my passport pretty early, but I wasn't the one holding on to it. So it didn't feel like I had a passport. I got my passport since I was like six. Yeah, six, because I traveled with my dad to Africa. So Yeah, I actually did have my passport early. But enough rambling. Make sure you guys get your passport. Even if you're not using it now, it will come handy in the future. So, the first tip that I want to give is don't be afraid to do research. What I mean by that is don't be afraid to look into the countries that you want to go to, because research is very important. You have to research the country that you're going to. You have to know their currency. You just have to know everything about the country, if it's safe, where you're going to stay, if you have any contacts there, how long you're going to be there, how much is, like, all this you have to do research, plan ahead. Because if you plan ahead, when it's time to go, you'll be ready for everything. You'll be prepared for any type of situation. I'm very big on like researching. Me, I kind of have a little problem because when I do research, if I see one bad review on something, I'm not doing it, or I'm gonna look for another situation. But still, if you're like that, don't be afraid to do research. That means you're just kind of thorough with it. But always do your research. Whatever country you're going to, do research and just have fun with it. So the second tip that I want to give actually is don't be afraid to travel alone. I have a crazy backstory to this because recently in March, I went I traveled back to Egypt from the UAE. So, and I did it alone. But before I left, I actually had planned to travel with some other people, but that didn't happen. And like, I was kind of afraid to travel alone because I didn't like, I've been to places alone and I've been alone before, but I don't know, traveling to another country by myself, I was like, I was actually about to cancel that trip because I was like, if I go there and I'm alone and I don't have nothing to do, I'm gonna be bored. So I was thinking last minute, I said, you know what? It was during spring break during school. So I was like, you know what? Forget it. Let me do it. So I ended up going to Egypt for about a week. And when I tell you that was one of the best things I can do, like, I think I'd rather travel alone now for the most part to certain countries because traveling alone is like you have this certain type of freedom and like it opens your minds to like so many new things. So like being alone, I was just going around, being by myself, uh, just having alone time. And I think alone time is very, very important, even if it's for 5 days to a week. Just travel alone. Don't be afraid to travel alone. Of course, like I said, that's why don't be afraid to do research comes before that, because once you do research and you know how to move, you'll definitely be able to travel alone and you won't have any problems with that. And it's fun. Traveling alone is very fun. Like I really enjoyed it. 10 out of 10. I'ma definitely do it again. So the third and final point that I want to come to is don't be afraid to go to countries that are far from you. I know many people in the US, they travel to like in states or closer, like close places like Miami, Mexico. Mexico is pretty far, but you know what I'm saying. Like it's pretty close to the US. So what I'm saying is don't be afraid to travel to Australia, countries in Europe. I know many people are like, oh, how's that a tip? But I'm telling you, that's a tip because when you start traveling to those countries, to countries that are very far, you'll like you'll feel like, and you can go anywhere in the world, you know what I'm saying? So once you start getting used to traveling to like places in Europe that you never that you've never heard of, or to Australia, like to the other side of the world basically, like you'll feel like anything is possible, anywhere is possible if you have the funds, if you did your research, if you're not afraid to travel alone. I'm telling you, like, it's a great tip because now that I've traveled from here to countries like the US, or not the US, sorry, to Egypt, to the UAE, because significantly is far from the US. You know what I'm saying? Those countries. So like now I feel like I can travel anywhere, and I'm ready to travel anywhere because I've had those experiences traveling to new countries that is like nowhere like home, or that's very far from home. So yeah, I think that's a very great tip. Uh, Start traveling to countries that are very far, countries that are new to you, countries that you've never heard of. Do your research. Don't be afraid to travel alone and travel to those countries. You know what I'm saying? So that concludes the end of the podcast. If you guys really enjoyed, I think I enjoyed it. I had fun talking about traveling. I love traveling. Wherever you guys are listening this podcast to, if it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, make sure you guys follow, subscribe, leave a review also. I appreciate you guys listening to this podcast. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Assalamu alaikum.